Chris Holstein. I don't want to sound like your grandmother. Welcome to Milestone Villanova's boardroom.
Thank you.
It's luxurious and you deserve that. You've been through 9 months of, I guess, an evolution in your life. What's surprised you?
It's been an evolution. It's been a learning curve. I've got to say that I believe I've been somewhat blessed in that my experience with local government has helped me cater with that learning curve more so than anybody who would be thrown in the deep end. Mm-hmm. But it is, even with that experience in local government, it is a drastic cultural change on how things are done and how you go about things. Just to give a very simplistic example is that as a councillor, I sit in a council meeting, I can talk to any of the items on the agenda, I hop up when I get the call from the Mayor and I debate those items. In Parliament, you've then got to put your name on a list, you've got to get yourself with a prepared speech. It must of course be sure that you've got it right and you're recorded in everything you say. So it then goes on to the Hansard. So I suppose there's a lot more effort being put into just making the speeches, making those comments in the chamber at Parliament is different to when you would just hop up at council. Mm-hmm. Talk from the heart, talk with what you believe this to be the case. In Parliament I've got to be spot on. I've got to make sure that what I say is in fact factual, it's not hearsay, it's to the point.
Yeah. And in the time when promises were being made, February, March of this year, there were some opportunities and some challenges. What are you happy about?
What I'm really happy about with the commitments we made. Look, when we came into government, the black hole was uncovered and was finally through Treasury and that being able to be determined what that was. At $5.2 billion black hole, made a lot of us think that some of those election commitments that had been made, whilst it was very strongly mentioned by Barry, I will honour my commitments, we, as me and several other members of Parliament, thought that, okay, we're not going to get everything we want in the first 12 months as much as we'd like to and then go in for more promises and more commitments. We thought there'd be some delays with some of the processes. To the government's credit, to the Treasurer's credit, to Barry's credit, all of those key things that we had committed to got initiation funding. They include Wiseman's Ferry Roads upgrade. They include the commitment to the Woy Woy Road upgrade. They included the Woy Woy Rehab, which even produced the fertile ground finally that we got the federal government going, oh yeah, and we'll add to that as well. So that just, it reaped even greater benefits than what was anticipated. I was very, very pleased that my major commitments that we had made in the election at least got their kickstart. And what you'll see now in the next couple of years as we build on those, make those come to reality, we're going to be hunting, as we are now, for more commitments and more
So what
more
does
dollars.
What's on your list? What does the next 12 months look like? I mean, from the top down.
Okay, from the top down, well, it's really more than 12 months.
Yeah.
Of course, the Gosford Challenge is generating a lot of comment, a lot of concern, and people have forgotten that this was what was dictated by the majority of people in seeing the city move forward. There is contentious parts of it. I'll have some issues with some parts of it, but it's the macro level. We've got people coming back and complaining about what colour the seats will be in the auditorium and we haven't even got the funding for the concert hall and auditorium. People want to get down into that nitty gritty. They've got to look at this in the macro level, because what will happen with the Gosford Challenge, the main thing you will see will be the relocation of Gosford Primary School to a far better site at Henry Kendall with better facilities, better resources for the kids. And it's at that point, and that will happen for the start of the 2014 school year. What you'll then see is hopefully we've done the background work and the various development applications. Those will see actually work commencing in areas such as what will at that stage be the old Gosford Primary School site.
Okay. There are there are other precincts, the hospital precinct.
Most definitely.
The state government participation in that, or?
Definitely. See, the landing which everybody's talking about at the moment is only 4% of the Gosford Challenge. In land mass area, it's only 4%. It's but a small part. There are other areas of the city that are going to be key in that. Where council moves in the coming decade with the Market Town site, quite correctly, the hospital precinct, there's a fair expanse of land up there. I'm very keen as the state member to see that any benefit that is gained from that land goes into not only the infrastructure that needs to accommodate it, but it also must go back into the health precinct as we ensure that we're going to have first-class health services.
It raises the question, this infrastructure plan or fund, can it be localised? Do you think we can create... We published a story about Tinkler tipping 10 cents or 20 cents a tonne into Newcastle to create a separate fund. We don't have a Tinkler, there's no surprise there. What can we do as a... I think
that honestly, I don't think any fund that you could tip into with the resources we've got at the moment is going to provide the necessary infrastructure we need. I think we've got to be realistic. Some of our infrastructure actually gives benefit beyond the Central Coast. When we talk about, what we're going to do with our rail lines, how we're going to improve that, how do we improve aspects of our road. One of the things that is very key for us and is a very important thing is the F3 to M2 connection. It's not even in my electorate. Yeah. It gives benefit right up for anybody heading towards Sydney. So there's a key infrastructure that we couldn't fund on our own, but something that's going to need to be looked at in a broader sense, and that's what Infrastructure New South Wales, and that's the challenge that Nick Greiner has. That's why I think a fund for us and us alone wouldn't generate what's needed on some of the key works that are going to be required.
Well, the example, the state government has given funds to the Northern Rail, freight rail, which is exciting. And I get excited about that because it puts us clearly on the map of areas where there are issues and things to be addressed.
Look, that's a huge one. And I'm not an engineer, I'm not an expert in transport, but I can see that is going to be, you talk about duplication of freight lines and those things. You talk about crossing the Hawkesbury, the tunnels that would need to be changed. This is massive.
$1 billion or more.
Yeah, well, you're on the lower scale if you're saying $1 billion. It's going to take more than that. Okay. These are major projects that couldn't be funded through the Central Coast alone. That doesn't mean that the Central Coast shouldn't shy away from the things it needs to. Remember, there's 150 million plus that needs to be spent on the West Gosford. Be very careful there, because at times the overall good for the community and West Gosford would generate benefit. Whilst it's in the Gosford electorate, it gives benefit to Terrigal, gives benefit to the entrance. It even gives benefit to the residents of Wyong and beyond. And then what about every tourist that comes into this city that says it's too hard getting in through West Gosford, I might just go up to Lake Macquarie or Port Macquarie, I'll move on further. We improve that section, that generates an income into our benefit into our community. So some of the projects of a magnitude that couldn't be funded just purely through the Central Coast alone.
We're talking about NBN as though it's already arrived and, except an incident in West Gosford, which we've talked about. There are opportunities at a business level for NBN to embrace or encourage people to come from Sydney or Newcastle, specifically to Gosford, because that will be an impact point. Can we talk to state government about setting up a research facility for construction and planning, or for medicine or whatever, for law, for design, to encourage Sydney or Newcastle businesses to come and invest in a test site in
Well, they're going to be the jobs of RDA, Regional Development Australia. They're going to be the jobs of CCRDC. Their opportunities are there. There's always going to be, with, as far as I'm concerned, a pathway to put a voice to the government. There's lots of competing demands, as you would appreciate. Everybody has the same thoughts. We've got to use our pluses. I've got to say, one of the things that bothers me at the moment is the minority groups that then jump up and down about things. They actually damage our credibility and our ability to move forward in a positive sense. Unfortunately, we do in this community get very self-centred in, I like it just the way it is, I don't want any changes, you should say it just that way. And the thing that people don't appreciate is change is the one thing you can be sure of.
Because we've avoided it on our Central Coast for the last 30 years, haven't we?
Who's we?
Oh well, the Central Coast has avoided change. There's not.
Yeah, that's been in our makeup. Unfortunately, the community, and you still see pockets of it. We've got to embrace change. I said at a luncheon the other day with one of the Chamber of Commerce's, you've got to. You will never change if you constantly embrace the fear of what change will bring. And I can give some great examples. We had fear from people when we built the stadium. We had fear from people when we built the Arts Centre, when we built the Peninsula Leisure Centre. Fear that things would be different. Fear and petitions from thousands of people saying, we don't want it, we don't like it, it shouldn't happen, this will happen and this will happen, and all looking at the worst case scenarios. Rather than having faith in the process, rather than having faith in the people making the decisions. I mentioned those 3 facilities. You tell me, give me a dozen people now who said you should knock them down, put something else there. You won't get anyone. So
you've raised a great point. The faith in people for the first time, and I've got a limited history here, but Central Coast Regional Development Corporation and their partners have got international skills.
There are some very, very capable people there. They are linking in with, of course, the government. They're linking in with the council, and I believe that change is imminent, but we've still got to get rid of these doomsdayers that think that change is going to be bad for them. I've got to look at it in one way. This is what really gets me, and I suppose this is as you go through in life, your priorities change. I remember when my priority was, getting to the weekend's football match and having a game of football and drinks with a few mates and just enjoying life. Well, as you get older, 5 kids, 5th grandchild's arrived in October. I start thinking about where are they going to go into the future? Where is their opportunities to live on the coast, enjoy the coast? Where is their opportunities to have employment here, gainful employment and be able to work on the coast? They are limited because we haven't kept pace with what's needed here. That doesn't go without saying that there needs to be the necessary infrastructure in place. And so you've got to manage that. You've got to make sure.
Have we had a plan?
There's been a litany of plans.
Why don't they work?
Well, I think the problem is, the greatest problem has been because of that rapid growth that we got. The plan that was there in the 1960s never really catered for where we were going to go. Nobody expected that growth would have been so quickly realised. Now, I think there's a lot more expertise into the planning of where we will be and who we'll have and how many people we'll have. There's also, I think we've come to, for Gosford, an area where, look, our expansion is such that it's not going to go out into greenfield because of environmental reasons. But now we're actually building on top of where the buildings are. We're looking into the city. Rather than go out, we're going up. We've got to accept those changes.
Well, we talked briefly about Red Airs, and yes, it's a federal plan. But one of the numbers that strikes me, by 2031, it's now 5 years old. By 2031, we want to be a population of an extra 100,000 people. Now
it's around 100,000 in the next 20 years.
Yeah. So if we do the 20 years maths, that's and if 2 people live in a dwelling, for instance. That means we need 25 or 50,000 dwellings.
I think the figure's about 2.2, 2.3.
Oh, I'm doing the
per
maths
family.
here, Chris.
Okay,
Come on, ease up. I've got 2 I've got 100,000 people. It means I need 50,000 dwellings. Let's say, ease the maths, let's say we need 40,000 dwellings in 20 years' time. Yeah. That's still 2,000 new dwellings each year. I listen to that maths and I'm saying, well, I've been here 10 years and I reckon I'm lucky if I've seen 5,000 dwellings in 10 years.
Yeah.
Who drives that?
Who drives that is, in a lot of instances, the economy. Developers who feel that they can come in and make a go of those. How many developments have we got around Gosford where you see them half constructed, half done? I can show you approvals for various developments that are still the old building there because for whatever reason the economy, the world economy as it is not conducive. I don't want to even start on the banks, and but you know they're finding it very difficult to get finance from the banks because the banks have all got toey after the global financial crisis.
And are we going back to the landing or the Gosford Challenge and say that's the impetus we need to get on people's radar as an investment?
Oh, so true, so true. And I've got to get that message out to people. We've got to give them confidence that if these things will come, what will follow on from there. You know, in doing anything in business, what do you need? Yes, you probably do need finance to move it forward. Yes, you need the ability and the experience, but you also need the attitude and the positive, I can do this, I can make this happen. And so often I think that is where we lack. There's a saying that your perception creates your reality. Well, the perception at the moment is one that can't happen. Tell me all the reasons why it can't. No, tell me all the reasons why it can. And unfortunately, there's a few players in that. There's government, both at state, local and federal. There is the financial institutions, the banks and the lending authorities. We've got to start turning their attitudes around, and I think the instigation of the landing with government-owned land and being able to move forward with that will be a spark that I think will ignite. Unfortunately, for some people, they say, well, that's still another year and a half, 2 years away. But they're the reality. I've learnt in 20 years as a politician, the best decisions you make aren't for tomorrow. The best decisions you make are 4, 5 and 10 years
well,
in
you
the
mentioned
distance.
Our children's children. I need Chris Holstein, councillor now.
Oh, okay, new hat.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, I had a council function, that's why the badge is on
That's
this
okay,
morning.
no, it reminded me, hardly anyone talks about improving the efficiencies of local government here in our region. We've just heard that, what's the position there? Is that done and dusted? Can we move forward with a regional government, or is it going to be something...
The amalgamation of councils is what you're talking about. Look, my opinion, I always had this opinion where I didn't believe that there would be, I questioned whether there would be better representation. I've got to say, along with other things, my attitude's changing on that. The opportunity exists. I still say this, that there are much smaller councils than what you have in Gosford that could amalgamate and would be a far greater and higher priority. But is this something that we should rule out? No, we shouldn't. Is this something that needs to have independent assessment of how the benefits would be gained and what benefits? And people get lost in stupid things, arguments that, there'll be 10 less councillors. Great, that's $200,000. That won't even build you a tenth of a roundabout in 1 year. Well, it's not that will give the benefit. Will you be able to joint purchase, joint contract, resource share? Well, hang on, we do that now anyway. So some of the things we actually work together now. I suppose that where it would be beneficial is in the overall planning. Those things happen now. They've been happening for many years. The fact that when we look to purchase, we do works with Wyong to look at amalgamation of providing services. We've done that with water. We've looked at aspects of waste disposal, all of those things, and there's much more that can be looked at. It probably would make the process a little easier in doing those things. But I think the planning strategies would be where the benefit would be gained, because you've got Wyong saying, I need a regional theatre, I need sports fields to meet the elite sports in this area, and here's Gosford. And so Gosford's making the same decisions, where in fact we are not that difficult area. It is not that hard, with proper infrastructure to travel from Wyong to Gosford.
Right.
So
and that's the challenge. I guess the challenge for business people is if they saw two such similar businesses, they are probably the first and second largest businesses on the coast, and someone was to say, let's put these together and let's build some economies, and without impacting representation, because that is important. Your role is...
It's the grassroots of any government.
Indeed.
But economies of scale, as I said, we're into some of those now, but that could be expanded upon. An independent assessment, and I think it needs to be independent, because, you know, we all have bias one way or the other. If an independent assessment could be done of how you bring the two councils together, and it could be proven to the councillors that this is going to be better for us in the long run, hey, you know.
All right.
I also have an opinion that I believe, you know, councillors should be remunerated in reason, because quite frankly, we do have some very good people on council, but they get a pittance. And they can't spend the time because they all have other jobs. And
Absolutely.
that.
No,
And I say this, and I'm about to bail from council, but I'll leave council in September simply because it's my belief, it always has been, that you can't be a worker to two masters. I've got to.
But your comment about reasonably remunerated, I think it's pathetic that we expect people to give what they give as councillors. You know,
but we could also would attract probably a better quality of person too. And I'm not being derogatory to who we've got. You know, we've got some very smart businessmen, very smart operators. You know, in the social services here, Laurie Marr, there's no better than what he's done. Craig Doyle is a very astute businessman. Now, there are people with capabilities there, but how much more could we then attract?
Yeah. Chris, what's happening with red tape? That is the question that most businesses ask.
Look, very much in the minds of the ministers, I can assure you, because we are speaking constantly about how we can improve the systems. Remember, a commitment was given by the coalition in opposition that we would look to red tape. For every two pieces of legislation coming up, for every piece of legislation coming up, the minister's looking for two to be removed. In other words, you know, cut down on this red tape and let's get to the crust of things. Now, all the ministers are working through there. There has been a fair bit of legislation coming forward that has actually seen other pieces of legislation removed. One of the things we'll do when we come back into Parliament in the new year, it's one of the questions that we as the backbenchers have from the ministers, you know, how are we tracking on our red tape removal? And I suppose that the ministers maybe they would or wouldn't agree with me, but I've got to say that the battle's been there within the bureaucracy. There has been a culture set in its ways for 12 years of the last 12 years, I think needs to be enacted on, and that's not something that doesn't happen overnight. That's going to take some time, but I can assure you the backbenchers and that are asking the questions. We made that commitment. How are we progressing? So you'll probably hear more in the new year as each minister will stand up and say, well, this is what I've been able to do. I know I'll be asking those questions. Okay. How are we making life easier to do business in the state of New South Wales?
Sure. Just on, we need to move along because we could spend 4 hours here, but we can't.
I'm on a time limit, folks.
What are you looking at 2012 for? What are you at the end of that?
Okay.
Hold me accountable to this, Mark.
Oh, okay. Now he wants the commitments that right out.
Look in the
this
camera.
will be held out right out.
Yes.
Okay, 2012. What I need to be able to see happening in 2012, I need to be able to finalise up the plans on the commitments that we made in the election. I want to be able to see that we are now moving towards finalisation of plans for the Woy Woy Road completion, and I'd want to see us getting to the path at the end of that year, hopefully for some, at least some going to tender on some of those works. I expect to see works well underway on the millions that have been committed to Wiseman's Ferry Road. I expect to see construction underway on the West Gosford intersection, and I anticipate to see construction underway on the Woy Woy rehab. In regard to that, I expect that the landing and aspects of the Gosford Challenge will see us in the process of lodging DAs for what will be happening on the Gosford Primary School site with that 2014 commencement date. I'd expect us to be advancing on the health precinct and what opportunities will exist within that, whilst also looking at some other facets within the challenge area of improvements and works that could be happening in there. There's a litany of things, little minor things in train, everything from bringing a university campus in, improvements to some of the sporting facilities that we have around the CBD. There's a range of things I'd like in there. So basically, I want to be able to, whilst looking at the bigger picture, I also need to get into some of the minor issues. I need to get into some of those little things that we have those improvement works. And I say little things, 100,000 here or 200,000 there. There's issues with definitely with our roads in the peninsula, some of our drainage and those things. Looking for those hot spots down there and trying to find those little pockets of money within the government that can be directing funds into those things.
Chris Olstein, thank you.
Always a pleasure.